Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
It's The In Show, Australia's only show dedicated to innovation from Adelaide, Australia and across the globe.
It's David Rice and Troy Sincock talking to entrepreneurs and startups and people here to change the world. If you want to keep listening, make sure you resubscribe to our new feed in Apple Podcasts on iTunes to keep listening to The In Show. You just have to click on The In Show with a coloured logo and... of course, rate us 5 stars while you're there if you can.
Absolutely. You're online. You might as well do it.
Exactly. Now, let's find out what's in today. There are some extraordinary innovations, and this guy is he up to something?
Absolutely. I mean, this guy came to Adelaide last year for Hybrid World Adelaide in October. And prior to him coming, we got the chance to actually have a chat to him over the phone. He's a futurist, so he's thinking very far beyond what my brain is even capable of. But one of the things that's really important to him is the connections between the electronic world and the biological world. So here's Andrew Hessel with what he had to say.
What's in for me? That's a fascinating question. The thing that's absolutely in for me right now is building bridges between electronic systems and biological systems. And I'll explain that. If you've ever had your heart checked or your brain checked, they hook up electrodes to your body and they can read the electrical signals of your body directly with these electrodes. It's how the common one is the electrocardiogram, reading the heartbeat. It turns out that all living systems are electrical. And we're getting really good at starting to build interfaces, connections between these living systems and our electronic systems, which have gotten extremely sensitive and powerful. So, one example of that's really interesting about, this bridge building might be a brain-machine interface that would allow a paralyzed person to manipulate a robot arm. But at a molecular level, it might be connecting a protein or even a living cell to an electrode and detecting what that protein or that cell is experiencing. So that might make a new type of sensor for a smell, for example, a certain odor. It can be a new type of sensor for a virus. And then there's a giant play space in between. So just that bridge building between the electronic world that we know so well and this biological world that is still very mysterious and hard to measure in real time without damaging it is the thing that's absolutely in for me. And one other example I'll put out there is just also bioprinting. That's a higher order connection there. We're using living cells and other biomaterials as inks in 3D printers. And of course, we know that 3D printers are being used for really fascinating things today. It gets even more fascinating when you start to fill these printers with biological ink.
That's futurist Andrew Hessel with what's in for him on the In Show podcast with David Grice and Troy Sincock. And we are going to hear an incredible story on our next podcast, something that just took me by surprise after a conversation with a friend. And now I want to find a way to contribute to it.
How often do you have a haircut, Troy?
A bit more regularly these days.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what happens to your hair when you cut it off.
How often have you been waiting for your appointment? You're sitting there in a chair while someone else is getting their hair cut, just watching the hair fall to the ground, and someone comes through with a broom and then it's gone. And, I've often stopped to go, where does that go? Because if that's happening all day, that'd be a lot of hair.
Well, you would assume it would just go in the bin. On the next podcast, we're going to find out what happens to it.
Yes, and I got to tell you, the implications are far greater than you'd even imagine. That's on the next In Show podcast. Make sure you listen.
The In Show, What's In? Subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. A Dave and the Beanstalk production.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.